Dr. HFY Corvin moved through his laboratory with the grace of someone who had done this same routine for 300 years. His 4 arms worked independently, adjusting instruments and checking data displays, while his crystalline mind processed information at speeds that would make most species dizzy. The Zilarian professor was widely considered the greatest. Expert on intelligence in the known galaxy. Today was supposed to be simple. Another species wanted to join the Galactic Federation's Advanced Sciences Council. Another group of beings who thought they were smart enough to contribute to the galaxy's most important research. HFY had tested 47 different species over the centuries, and the results were always the same. Most barely qualified for basic Federation membership, let alone the Advanced Council. The humans were no different, he was certain. They had only made contact with the Federation 30 years ago. Their technology was primitive compared to most member species. Their lifespans were laughably short. And from what he had read in the preliminary reports, they had only recently figured out how to travel between stars without destroying themselves in the process. HFY's research assistant, Dr. Veilfis, entered the laboratory carrying a stack of data tablets. The younger Zilarian's thought crystals flickered with barely contained excitement. "Professor, the human delegation has arrived at Meridian Prime," Veilfis announced. They brought several representatives for testing, including their top scientists and mathematicians. "Of course they did," HFY replied, not looking up from his work. "They always bring their best." "It makes no difference. The Corvothian logic matrices will reveal their true capabilities within hours." The professor gestured toward the center of the laboratory, where dozens of holographic puzzles floated in the air. The 3-dimensional displays showed complex, geometric patterns that shifted and changed as they rotated slowly in space. These were the Corvothian logic matrices, puzzles that had been developed over thousands of years to test the reasoning abilities of the galaxy's most intelligent species. Even gifted Zilarian children needed several rotation periods to solve the basic versions. The advanced matrices had stumped some of the Federation's greatest minds for decades. If the humans could solve even the simplest ones in reasonable time, HFY would be mildly impressed. "Shall I bring the first test subject to the laboratory?" Veilfis asked. "Give me another hour to finish the calibrations," HFY said. "I want to make sure the matrices are functioning at peak efficiency. When these humans fail, I don't want them claiming the equipment was faulty." Veilfis left to prepare the testing chamber, and HFY continued his work. He had seen this pattern so many times before. A species would make contact with the Federation, achieve basic membership, and then immediately apply for advanced status. They never wanted to spend the decades or centuries learning and growing that true advancement required. The laboratory door chimed softly. HFY looked up, expecting to see Veilfis returning with the first human test subject. Instead, he saw a human female in a dark blue uniform standing in the doorway. She was tall by human standards, with short black hair and the kind of confident posture that suggested military training. "Excuse me," the human said. "I'm Commander Lisa Martinez with the Human Diplomatic Mission. I was looking for Guest Quarters Section C, but I think I got lost." "This is Research Laboratory 7, HFY replied. "Guest quarters are 3 levels down and 2 sections over. You took a wrong turn at the main corridor." "Thank you, Commander," Martinez said. She started to leave, then paused. "I'm sorry, but are you Dr. Corvin? The one who will be testing our people?" "I am. I wanted to thank you for agreeing to evaluate our application. I know you're very busy, and this means a lot to our people." HFY studied the human. Most species either tried to impress him with displays of their intelligence or challenged his expertise when they learned who he was. This human seemed genuinely grateful, which was unusual. "I am simply doing my job," he said. The Federation requires objective evaluation of all species seeking advanced status. Of course. Well, thank you anyway. Commander Martinez smiled and turned to leave again. Mama, where are we going? HFY looked past the commander and saw a small human standing behind her. The child was female, probably young by human standards, with long brown hair and curious brown eyes. She wore simple clothes and carried what appeared to be a small stuffed animal. We're going to our rooms, Emma, Commander Martinez said. You're not supposed to wander off like that. But I wanted to see the pretty lights, the child said, pointing into the laboratory. HFY followed her gaze and realized she was looking at the Corvothian logic matrices. The holographic displays did produce colorful patterns as they shifted through their sequences, but he had never thought of them as particularly attractive. I'm sorry, Commander Martinez said to HFY. She's 8 years old, and everything is fascinating to her. Emma, we need to go now. What are those? Emma asked, stepping into the laboratory despite her mother's words. They're like puzzles made of light. Emma, her mother said sharply. It's quite all right, HFY said, surprising himself. There was something about the child's genuine curiosity that reminded him of why he had first become interested in studying intelligence. They are indeed puzzles, young human. Very complex puzzles that test how well different species can think and solve problems. Emma moved closer to the nearest matrix, her eyes wide with wonder. How do they work? You manipulate the geometric elements to create stable patterns, HFY explained. Each piece must be placed correctly according to mathematical principles. The goal is to achieve perfect balance and harmony within the three-dimensional space. Can I try one? Commander Martinez stepped forward quickly. Emma, no. Dr. Corvin is very busy, and these are important scientific instruments. We shouldn't bother him. Actually, HFY said, his scientific curiosity overriding his usual protocols, it might be interesting to observe an untrained human approach to the matrices. For research purposes, of course. Dr. Valthus chose that moment to return to the laboratory. Professor, I have the first test subject ready for, what is this child doing here? This is an impromptu observation, HFY said. The young human expressed interest in the matrices. Professor, surely you're not going to let an untrained juvenile contaminate our research environment. Valthus protested. The matrices are calibrated for adult cognitive assessment. One simple trial will not contaminate anything, HFY replied. He was beginning to find his assistant's rigid thinking annoying. Besides, this will provide a baseline for comparison with their adult capabilities. Emma had been listening to this exchange with the patient expression of a child accustomed to adults discussing her as if she weren't present. When HFY gestured toward the simplest of the floating puzzles, she approached it with obvious excitement. Just touch the elements you want to move, HFY instructed. The holographic interface will respond to your intentions. Most species require several attempts to understand the basic mechanics. Emma reached out tentatively and touched one of the glowing geometric shapes. It moved smoothly under her finger, rotating in space. She giggled with delight and touched another piece, then another. Within moments, she was manipulating multiple elements simultaneously, her small hands dancing through the holographic display with surprising coordination. Fascinating, HFY murmured. Her motor control adaptation is remarkably quick. But, as he watched more closely, HFY realized something strange was happening. Emma wasn't just learning to manipulate the interface. She was actually solving the puzzle. The geometric elements were beginning to align in patterns that suggested she understood the underlying mathematical relationships. This was impossible. Even gifted Zelarian younglings needed detailed instruction before they could make meaningful progress on the matrices. This human child was working purely on intuition, yet her movements showed a growing understanding of the puzzle's logic. Emma paused, studying the partially completed matrix with a thoughtful expression. Then she made a series of rapid adjustments, her fingers moving with increasing confidence. The geometric elements began to lock into place, creating stable energy flows that pulsed with soft blue light. "There," Emma said, stepping back with satisfaction. "That one's done." HFY stared at the completed matrix in stunned silence. The solution was not only correct, it was elegant. Emma had found one of the most efficient paths through the puzzle, completing it in less than 3 minutes. This should have been impossible for any untrained being, let alone a child from a species he had never tested before. "The calibration must be incorrect," Dr. Valthus said, his voice tight with disbelief. "There's no way a primitive juvenile could solve a Corvothian logic matrix that quickly." But HFY knew the calibration was perfect. He had checked it himself less than an hour ago, which meant that everything he thought he knew about human intelligence was wrong. Dr. HFY stood frozen in place, staring at the completed puzzle that glowed softly in the holographic display. His 4 arms hung motionless at his sides, while his crystalline thought matrices flickered rapidly, trying to process what he had just witnessed. 300 years of studying intelligence across the galaxy, and nothing had prepared him for this moment. Emma looked up at him with bright, curious eyes. "Did I do it right? The colors look pretty when they're all connected like that." "You?" "Yes," HFY managed to say. "You completed it correctly." Dr. Valthus pushed past them and began frantically checking the holographic display systems. "The equipment must be malfunctioning," he muttered, his thought crystals pulsing with agitation. "There's no other explanation. Professor, this child couldn't possibly have solved the Corvothian logic matrix in under 3 minutes." "The equipment is functioning perfectly," HFY said quietly. He had run full diagnostics just an hour earlier, and the system showed no anomalies, which meant that a human child had just accomplished something that should have taken a trained Zilarian adult at least 60 minutes to complete. Commander Martinez stepped closer to her daughter. "Emma, what did you do exactly?" "I just moved the pieces until they felt right," Emma said with a shrug. "It's like when I do jigsaw puzzles at home, except these pieces move in more directions. The shapes want to fit together in a certain way." HFY felt something cold settle in his chest. Emma was describing the puzzle in terms of intuitive pattern recognition rather than mathematical analysis. This suggested a completely different approach to problem solving than anything in his research. "Show me," he said suddenly. "Professor?" Valthus looked up from his diagnostic checks. "I want to see her do it again," HFY said. He activated another matrix, this one slightly more complex than the first. The holographic display materialized in the air, showing geometric shapes in multiple colors that pulsed with varying energy frequencies. Emma approached the new puzzle with the same casual interest she had shown in the first. But this time, HFY watched more carefully. He noticed that she didn't study the overall structure before beginning. Instead, she simply reached out and started touching elements that seemed to call to her. "There," she said, pointing to a blue triangular shape. "That one's lonely. It needs to connect to the red circle over there." She moved the shapes with quick, confident gestures. HFY realized that she wasn't calculating mathematical relationships or analyzing energy flow patterns. She was treating the puzzle like a living thing with needs and desires. "And this yellow square is trying to talk to those purple lines," Emma continued, manipulating multiple elements simultaneously. "They want to dance together." HFY watched in fascination as Emma's unconventional approach began producing results. The geometric elements were indeed forming stable relationships, but not in the methodical way that Zilarian minds typically approach such problems. Emma was finding connections that seemed random, but were somehow exactly right. Within 5 minutes, she had completed the second matrix. This puzzle typically took even experienced researchers 15 to 20 minutes to solve. "How are you doing this?" SciFi asked. Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. "I don't know. The shapes just show me where they want to go." "Don't they do that for you?" "No," SciFi said. "They most certainly do not." "That's weird," Emma said. "Maybe you're thinking too hard about it." Dr. Valthus made a strangled noise. The suggestion that a Xelarian might be overthinking a problem was nearly insulting to their species' intellectual pride, but SciFi found himself genuinely intrigued. "What do you mean by thinking too hard?" "Well," Emma said, swinging her stuffed animal absently, "when I try to figure out math problems at school, I have to think really hard and it's boring. But when I just let my brain be quiet and look at things, sometimes I can see patterns that aren't there when I'm trying to be smart." This was revolutionary. Emma was describing a cognitive process that bypassed conscious analysis entirely. She was solving complex logical problems through subconscious pattern recognition at a speed that defied everything SciFi understood about intelligence. "Emma," Commander Martinez said gently, "we really should go to our quarters now. Doctor, Corvin has important work to do." "Actually," SciFi said, "I would very much like to continue this observation. With your permission, of course." He activated a third matrix, this one significantly more complex than the previous two. The holographic display showed interlocking geometric forms that pulsed with multiple energy frequencies. This particular puzzle had been designed by the Corvanian Academy as a test for advanced graduate students. Most took several hours to complete it. Emma looked at the new puzzle and frowned slightly. "This one's different. It's angry." "Angry?" SciFi repeated. "The energy flows are all tangled up and fighting with each other," Emma said. "They're not supposed to do that." She reached into the holographic display and began moving elements, but this time her movements were more deliberate. Instead of simply connecting shapes that wanted to be together, she seemed to be untangling conflicts between different parts of the system. "See? This red spiral is trying to spin clockwise, but these blue bars are forcing it to go the other way," Emma explained as she worked. "That makes everything vibrate wrong. If I just move the blue bars over here, then the red spiral can spin properly, and the whole thing calms down." SciFi watched in amazement as Emma's adjustments began stabilizing the energy flows throughout the matrix. She wasn't just solving the puzzle. She was diagnosing and correcting fundamental inefficiencies in its design. "The green diamonds are in the wrong place too," Emma continued. "They're blocking the energy from flowing in a circle." "Energy likes to flow in circles, doesn't it?" "Yes," SciFi said faintly. "It does." Emma repositioned the green elements, and suddenly the entire matrix began humming with perfect harmonic resonance. The solution she had created was not only correct, but more efficient than the standard solution taught at the academy. "There," Emma said with satisfaction. "Now they're all happy." Dr. Valthus had stopped his diagnostic checks and was staring at the completed matrix with an expression of pure shock. "Professor, she just solved the Corvanian Master's Challenge in 12 minutes. "I know," SciFi said. "The Academy record is 4 hours and 37 minutes. I know. She's 8 years old. I am aware of that." Commander Martinez looked between the two Xelarians with growing concern. "Is something wrong? Emma, you didn't break anything, did you?" "Oh no," Emma said quickly. "I just helped the pieces stop fighting. They're much prettier when they're not angry at each other." SciFi activated his personal communicator and began recording. This was too important to trust to memory alone. He needed to document everything Emma had done and said. "Emma," he said carefully, would you be willing to try one more puzzle? This one is quite different from the others. Okay, Emma said cheerfully. As long as it's fun. HFY hesitated. The puzzle he was thinking of wasn't fun at all. It was the Architect's Paradox, a legendary challenge that had stumped the Federation's greatest minds for over a millennium. The puzzle was considered unsolvable by conventional means, which was why it remained in the research archives as a theoretical exercise. If Emma could solve the Architect's Paradox, it would fundamentally change everything the Federation thought it knew about intelligence and problem-solving. The holographic display materialized, showing a complex array of interlocking geometric forms that seemed to fold in on themselves in impossible ways. The energy patterns created optical illusions that made even looking at the puzzle disorienting for most species. Emma studied the display for a long moment, her expression serious for the first time. This one's really confused, she said finally. It doesn't know what it wants to be. That's correct, HFY said. The puzzle contains inherent contradictions that prevent any stable solution. But that's silly, Emma said. Why would someone make a puzzle that can't be solved? Sometimes the challenge is in understanding why something cannot be solved, HFY explained. Emma walked around the holographic display, viewing it from different angles. You know what? She said suddenly. I think everyone's been trying to solve this the hard way. What do you mean? They're trying to make all the pieces fit the way the puzzle wants them to fit, Emma said. But what if the puzzle is wrong? What if the pieces aren't supposed to fit that way at all? Before HFY could respond, Emma reached into the display and began making changes. But instead of trying to solve the puzzle as it was designed, she started rearranging the fundamental structure itself. The problem isn't with the pieces, she said as she worked. The problem is with the rules. If I change this and move that, and tell this part that it doesn't have to listen to that part anymore, the Architect's Paradox began to transform under Emma's hands, reshaping itself into something entirely new. The contradictions that had made it unsolvable were dissolving as Emma created new relationships between the elements. Within minutes, the legendary unsolvable puzzle had become a beautiful, stable geometric form that pulsed with gentle rainbow light. There, Emma said happily. Now it knows what it wants to be. HFY stared at the transformed puzzle in complete silence. News of what happened in Research Laboratory 7 spread through Meridian Prime faster than a solar flare. Within hours, scientists from 12 different species had gathered outside HFY's laboratory, demanding to know if the rumors were true. Had a human child really solved the Architect's Paradox? Had she done it in less than 20 minutes? Was the great Dr. Corvin losing his mind? HFY sat in his private office, staring at the recordings he had made of Emma's puzzle-solving session. He had watched them 17 times, analyzing every movement, every word, every expression on the child's face. Each viewing only confirmed what he didn't want to believe. Everything he had spent 3 centuries learning about intelligence was incomplete. Dr. Velthus entered the office without knocking, something he had never done before. Professor, there are representatives from the Federation Science Council outside. They're demanding an immediate explanation of what happened today. What did you tell them? HFY asked. That we were conducting preliminary observations and would file a full report when our analysis was complete, Velthus said. But they're not satisfied with that answer. Dr. Yethek from the Crystalline Institute says that if we've discovered a new form of intelligence, it could change the entire structure of the Federation. HFY turned away from his displays. What if we have, Velthus? What if human intelligence operates on principles we've never encountered before? Professor, with respect, that's impossible, Velthus said. Intelligence follows universal laws, mathematical reasoning, logical analysis, pattern recognition, memory storage, and retrieval. Bees are constants across all known species. What this human child did today must have some conventional explanation. Then explain it to me, SciFi said. Explain how an 8-year-old with no training solved puzzles that stump our graduate students. Explain how she identified structural flaws in the architect's paradox that our greatest theorists missed for 1,000 years. Veilthus was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps she was coached. Perhaps she had access to the solutions beforehand. From where? HFY demanded. Her species only made contact with the Federation 30 years ago. They've never seen Corvothian logic matrices before today. And the modifications she made to the architect's paradox were completely original. No one could have taught her those approaches because no one had ever thought of them. A soft chime announced an incoming message. SciFi activated his communication terminal and saw the familiar face of Ambassador John Crawford, the senior human diplomat. Dr. Corvin, Ambassador Crawford said formally, I understand there was some kind of incident involving my colleague's daughter today. Commander Martinez tells me that Emma may have accidentally damaged some of your research equipment. The equipment is fine, HFY said. Your Emma is ... remarkable. She's a good kid, Crawford said with a slight smile. Very curious about everything. I hope she wasn't too much trouble. On the contrary, HFY said, I would very much like to continue working with her. With your permission, of course. Crawford's expression grew more serious. Dr. Corvin, I should probably mention that Emma isn't typical of human children. She's what we call gifted. Her teachers say she thinks about problems differently than most kids her age. How differently? Well, she tested out of mathematics. Courses designed for children twice her age. She builds complex structures with simple toys that our engineers have trouble understanding. And she has this way of explaining complicated ideas using simple words that somehow make everything clearer. HFY felt his thought crystals pulse with excitement. Ambassador, would it be possible to arrange more formal testing sessions? With Emma? I believe she could provide crucial insights into human cognitive capabilities. I'll need to discuss it with her mother, Crawford said. But I think Commander Martinez would be open to the idea, as long as Emma enjoys it and it doesn't interfere with her education. After the communication ended, HFY turned to find Veilthus studying him with concern. Professor, surely you're not planning to base your official evaluation of human intelligence on the performance of one unusual child. Why not? HFY asked. We've always tested species using their best representatives. They're top scientists. They're most brilliant mathematicians. They're greatest problem solvers. If Emma represents the potential of human intelligence, then she's exactly who we should be studying. But she's just a child. Exactly, HFY said. She hasn't been trained to think the way we expect intelligent beings to think. She approaches problems with a completely fresh perspective, uncontaminated by conventional assumptions. The next day, Emma returned to the laboratory with her mother. She bounced through the corridors with infectious enthusiasm, pointing out interesting details in the station's architecture that most adults never noticed. Look, Mama, she said, stopping in front of a decorative wall panel. The patterns in the metal are like music notes, but they're playing a song for your eyes instead of your ears. Commander Martinez smiled at her daughter's observation. That's a lovely way to think about it, sweetheart. HFY overheard this exchange as they approached the laboratory. Emma's comment revealed another aspect of her unusual intelligence. She naturally translated concepts between different sensory modalities. Visual patterns became music, mathematical relationships became emotional connections, logical structures became living things with personalities. Good morning, Emma, HFY said when they entered the laboratory. Are you ready for more puzzles today? Yes, Emma said excitedly. Are there new ones? I want to see what kinds of problems they have. HFY had spent most of the night preparing a series of tests designed specifically for Emma. Instead of using standard assessment protocols, he had created challenges that would allow her to demonstrate her unique problem-solving approach. First test involved a holographic display of crystalline structures that grew and changed according to complex mathematical rules. Most species approached this type of puzzle by analyzing the underlying equations and predicting future growth patterns. Emma walked around the display, watching the crystals pulse and expand with obvious delight. "They're like flowers made of light," she said. "Each one is trying to grow towards something it needs." "What do you think they need?" SciFi asked. "Space to grow, energy to feed on, and friends," Emma said thoughtfully. "The lonely ones aren't growing as well as the ones that are close to others." She began adjusting the display parameters, not by calculating optimal values, but by watching how the crystals responded to her changes. When she increased the energy flow to isolated structures, they began growing more vigorously. When she brought compatible crystals closer together, they started synchronizing their growth patterns. Within minutes, Emma had created a thriving crystal garden that was both mathematically elegant and visually beautiful. But more importantly, she had identified social and environmental factors that the original designers had overlooked. "Fascinating," SciFi murmured, recording everything. "She's treating mathematical structures as living ecosystems." The second test was even more revealing. SciFi presented Emma with a complex resource allocation problem disguised as a game about feeding hungry space creatures. The puzzle required balancing competing demands with limited resources, a type of optimization problem that typically required sophisticated analytical software. Emma studied the display for a moment, then started making adjustments with quick, intuitive gestures. But instead of trying to maximize efficiency or minimize waste, she focused on making sure that none of the creatures went hungry. "This little blue one isn't getting enough food," she said, redirecting resources from an overfed creature to a starving one. "And these red ones work better when they eat together, so I'll give them a shared feeding station." Her solution wasn't mathematically optimal by traditional standards, but it was stable, fair, and sustainable. More importantly, it accounted for social and emotional factors that pure mathematical optimization ignored. "Dr. Corvin," Commander Martinez said quietly, "may I ask what you're learning from these tests?" "That human intelligence may be the most sophisticated form of problem-solving the galaxy has ever encountered," SciFi replied honestly. "Emma doesn't just solve problems. She understands them in ways that pure logical analysis cannot achieve." "I don't understand," Commander Martinez said. "Watch," SciFi said, activating a third display. This one showed a simulation of traffic flow through a space station corridor system. The challenge was to optimize movement patterns to prevent congestion and bottlenecks. Emma looked at the simulation and immediately began making changes. But instead of focusing on traffic efficiency, she started paying attention to the individual. Travelers represented by small moving dots. "These green dots are tired," she said, creating rest areas along their route. "And these purple ones are scared of the loud noises from the engine section, so I'll give them a quieter path." Her modifications reduced overall traffic efficiency by 12%, but they eliminated stress points that would have led to system failures during peak usage periods. Emma had intuitively understood that the real problem wasn't moving dots through corridors efficiently. It was helping people navigate their environment comfortably and safely. The next morning, SciFi's laboratory looked very different. Instead of the usual sterile research environment, colorful cushions and low tables had been arranged in a circle. Holographic displays floated at child-friendly heights, and the harsh overhead lighting had been replaced with warm, gentle illumination that felt more welcoming. Emma arrived early with her mother, carrying a small backpack filled with what she called sharing snacks. and a collection of simple toys from Earth. She had been excited about meeting young beings from other worlds ever since. SciFi mentioned the possibility. Are they really coming? Emma asked, bouncing on her toes as she looked around the transformed laboratory. They should arrive soon, SciFi said. He was more nervous than he cared to admit. What he was about to attempt had never been tried before in Federation. Research. Instead of testing individuals separately, he was bringing together young representatives from different species to work on problems collaboratively. The first to arrive was Zix, a young crystalline entity who looked like a collection of floating geometric shapes that glowed with soft blue light. Crystalline beings thought in pure mathematics and communicated through harmonic frequencies that most species couldn't understand without translation devices. Zix hovered near the entrance, a PPARENTL, why uncertain about the unusual setup. The entities. Crystalline facets were cycling through rapid color changes, which SciFi recognized as a sign of curiosity mixed with caution. "Hello," Emma said, walking up to Zix with a bright smile. "I'm Emma. Are you here to play with puzzles too?" Zix's translation device produced a melodic tone that converted to words. "I am Zix. I do not understand play. I am here to demonstrate crystalline cognitive capabilities." "Playing is when you do something because it's fun," Emma explained. "Don't you ever do things just because they make you happy?" Zix's colors shifted to a pattern that SciFi had never seen before. After a moment, the translation device spoke again. I find mathematical harmonies pleasant." "Is that similar to your fun?" "I think so," Emma said. "Want to see something?" "Cool. I brought these from my planet." She pulled out a set of colorful wooden blocks from her backpack. They were simple geometric shapes, but when Emma began stacking them, they created interesting mathematical relationships. Zix moved closer, fascinated. The proportions follow Fibonacci sequences. The color patterns create pleasing visual harmonics. "Exactly," Emma said happily. "Math is everywhere, even in toys. Do you want to build something together?" The second visitor arrived while Emma and Zix were arranging blocks in increasingly complex patterns. Whisper of Storms was a young threnody, a species that perceived reality primarily through sound and vibration. The threnody looked like a graceful collection of flowing ribbons that moved through the air like underwater. Plants, Whisper of Storms, entered the laboratory making soft musical sounds that their translation. Device converted to speech. This space has unusual acoustic properties. There are mathematical harmonies resonating from that corner. That's Zix and Emma, SciFi explained. They're working together on a construction project. The threnody flowed closer to observe. Emma looked up from the blocks and waved. "Hi, I'm Emma. What's your name?" "I am called Whisper of Storms," the threnody replied. "Your building project creates interesting sound patterns as the structures grow." "Really?" Emma asked with genuine curiosity. "I can't hear that. What do they sound like?" Whisper of Storms made a series of gentle musical tones, like this. Each block placement creates a new note in an ongoing composition. Emma listened carefully, then began placing blocks more deliberately. "If I put this one here, does it make the song prettier?" "Much prettier," Whisper of Storms confirmed, their ribbons shimmering with what SciFi recognized as pleasure. Within minutes, the three young beings had developed a collaborative building system. Emma provided structural stability and spatial reasoning. Zix calculated mathematical relationships and proportions, and Whisper of Storms guided them toward arrangements that created beautiful acoustic harmonies. Dr. Velthus leaned over to whisper to SciFi. "Professor, this is fascinating. But how does it help us evaluate human intelligence?" "This looks more like a play session than a scientific assessment." "Watch more carefully," SciFi whispered back. "Emma is doing something remarkable. She's facilitating communication between two species that normally cannot interact meaningfully. It was true. Crystalline beings and Threnody had completely different ways of processing information. Mathematical entities and musical entities typically found no common ground for collaboration. But Emma was serving as a bridge between their different cognitive styles, translating concepts and finding connections that neither species could perceive on their own. The fourth member of their group arrived just as three friends completed an elaborate tower that hummed with perfect mathematical and musical harmony. Korath was a young mechanoid, a species of artificial intelligences housed in sleek metallic bodies. Mechanoids prided themselves on logical efficiency and optimal problem-solving. Korath's optical sensors swept the room, analyzing everything with mechanical precision. "I detect inefficient resource allocation," the young mechanoid announced. The structural elements could be arranged more optimally to achieve greater height with fewer materials. Emma looked up at Korath with interest. "Hi, I'm Emma. You're right, we could build it higher. But then it wouldn't sound as pretty, and Whisper of Storms really likes the music it makes. Aesthetic considerations are irrelevant to structural optimization," Korath replied. "But if we're building it for Whisper of Storms to enjoy, then the music is the most important part," Emma said patiently. "The tower is only as good as how much it makes our friend happy." Korath's optical sensors focused on Emma with what seemed like confusion. "You prioritize emotional satisfaction over objective efficiency?" "Of course," Emma said. "What's the point of being efficient if nobody is happy?" This statement seemed to cause some kind of processing conflict in Korath's systems. The young mechanoid stood motionless for several seconds before speaking again. I do not understand this perspective." "That's okay," Emma said kindly. "Want to help us build something? You could teach us how to make it stronger, and we could show you how to make it beautiful." HFY watched in amazement as Emma began incorporating Korath into their collaborative building project. She assigned the mechanoid tasks that utilized logical optimization, while ensuring that those optimizations served the group's collective goals rather than abstract efficiency metrics. Soon, all four young beings were working together on increasingly complex projects. Emma had naturally taken on the role of coordinator, not by asserting dominance, but by helping each individual contribute their unique strengths while considering the needs and preferences of the others. "Professor," Dr. Velthus said quietly, "I'm beginning to understand what you meant about human intelligence being different." "Are you?" HFY asked. "Emma isn't just smart," Velthus said. "She makes the others smarter by helping them work together. None of them could have built these structures alone, but under her guidance, they're creating things that surpass what any individual species could achieve." HFY nodded. "And notice how she does it. She doesn't impose human methods on the others. Instead, she learns how each species thinks and finds ways to connect their different approaches." As if to demonstrate this point, Emma was currently helping Zix and Whisper of Storms understand each other's contributions to their latest project. She translated Zix's mathematical calculations into musical metaphors that Whisper of Storms could understand, while explaining Whisper of Storms' acoustic insights in geometric terms that made sense to Zix. "The blue harmony that Whisper of Storms hears is like the golden ratio that you calculated, Zix," Emma was saying. "They're both about finding the perfect balance that makes everything feel right." Both young beings seemed to experience something like recognition as Emma helped them understand that their seemingly different perspectives were actually describing the same underlying truth from different angles. Later that day, HFY received an urgent communication from the Federation Science Council. News of his unofficial experiments had reached the highest levels of the government, and they were demanding an immediate formal presentation of his findings. "Dr. Corvin," came the voice of Counselor Vex Thigh, the Zellarian representative. "We Understand that you may have discovered significant anomalies in human cognitive function. The Council requires a full briefing within 2 standard cycles. I will prepare a comprehensive report, HFY replied. Be advised that your findings could have serious implications for human membership in the Advanced Sciences Council. Counselor Vexthai continued. If humans possess genuinely superior intelligence, it could destabilize the existing power structure of the Federation. After the communication ended, HFY sat in his office, thinking about what he had observed. The Council was asking the wrong question. They wanted to know if humans were smarter than other species, but that missed the point entirely. Humans weren't superior to other species. They were complementary to them. Emma's gift wasn't that she could solve problems better than crystalline entities or threnody or mechanoids. The Federation Council Chamber was the largest room on Meridian Prime, with seating for representatives from over 50 species. Today, every seat was filled. Word of Dr. HFY's discovery had spread throughout the galaxy faster than anyone expected, and everyone wanted to hear what the famous professor had learned about human intelligence. HFY stood at the center of the chamber, feeling smaller than he had in 3 centuries. Around him, some of the galaxy's most brilliant minds waited to hear his report. Crystalline entities hummed with mathematical precision. Draconian memory keepers accessed vast databases of historical precedent. Mechanoid logicians ran probability calculations, all of them expecting him to confirm what they already believed, that intelligence could be ranked, measured, and categorized according to universal standards. Honored counselors, HFY began, I have spent the past week conducting unprecedented research into human cognitive capabilities. What I have discovered challenges everything we thought we knew about intelligence itself. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Counselor Vexthai leaned forward in his crystalline seat. Dr. Corvin, please present your findings in the standard assessment format. Where do humans rank compared to established species? That question has no meaningful answer, HFY said quietly. The murmur became a buzz of confused conversation. Dr. Valthus, sitting in the observation section, looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Explain yourself, demanded Counselor Thorax. The mechanoid representative. HFY activated his holographic display. I will show you what I mean. The chamber filled with images from his testing sessions with Emma. The counselors watched in silence as the 8-year-old human solved puzzle after puzzle with impossible speed and insight. Impressive, admitted Counselor Yithak of the Crystalline Institute. The child shows remarkable pattern recognition abilities. However, individual excellence does not represent species-wide capabilities. You're absolutely right, HFY said. Which is why I want to show you something else. The display changed to show Emma working with Zix, Whisper of Storms, and Korath. The counselors watched as the 4 young beings collaborated on increasingly complex challenges, achieving solutions that none of their species had ever conceived. Independently. Notice, HFY said, that Emma is not dominating these interactions. She is facilitating them. The crystalline mathematics, the threnody harmonics, and the mechanoid logic all contribute equally to the solutions. But it is Emma who makes their collaboration possible. Interesting, said Counselor Whisper of Stars, the senior threnody representative. But how is this relevant to our assessment of human intelligence? Because intelligence is not a competition, HFY said. It is a collaboration. The chamber erupted in shocked protests. Several counselors began speaking at once, their various translation devices creating a cacophony of overlapping arguments. Order, called Supreme Counselor Nethys, an ancient being, whose species had founded the Federation millennia ago. Dr. Corvin, you are proposing a fundamental revision of cognitive science. Support your claim. HFY took a deep breath. For 300 years, I have tested species individually, ranking them according to their ability to solve standardized problems. This approach assumes that intelligence is about individual superiority. But what if we have been asking the wrong question? He activated a new display showing comparative data from decades of testing. Look at these results. Crystalline entities excel at mathematical analysis, but struggle with emotional reasoning. Threnody understand complex harmonics, but have difficulty with spatial relationships. Mechanoids optimize efficiently, but cannot account for aesthetic values. Every species has cognitive strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, said Counselor Vexthai impatiently. That is why we rank species according to their overall capabilities. But what if the goal is not to rank species? HFY asked. What if the goal is to solve problems that are too complex for any single form of intelligence to handle alone? The chamber fell silent. HFY continued. The greatest challenges facing our galaxy climate restoration, interstellar engineering, social harmony between diverse species. These problems require multiple types of thinking working together. They cannot be solved by individual brilliance, no matter how exceptional. He showed them a new recording of Emma working with young representatives from 8 different species on a complex resource management simulation. The problem involved balancing economic efficiency, environmental sustainability, social equity, and cultural preservation across multiple star systems. Watch carefully, HFY said. None of these young beings could solve this problem alone. Their individual species have been struggling with similar challenges for centuries. But together, guided by Emma's collaborative approach, they found solutions in hours. The counselors watched as Emma helped each participant contribute their unique perspective while ensuring that no single approach dominated the others. Mathematical optimization from the crystallines was balanced by Threnody harmony principles. Mechanoid efficiency was tempered by draconian historical wisdom. Human intuition connected insights that seemed completely unrelated. The human child serves as a cognitive catalyst, HFY explained. She does not impose human solutions on others. Instead, she helps different forms of intelligence communicate and combine their strengths. Counselor Thorax processed this information with mechanical precision. You suggest that human intelligence is specialized for interspecies collaboration? Yes, HFY said. And this may be the most important form of intelligence in a diverse galaxy. Supreme Counselor Nethys spoke thoughtfully. Dr. Corvin, what you describe sounds like diplomacy rather than intelligence. What if they are the same thing? HFY asked. What if true intelligence is not about being superior to others, but about helping others be their best selves? At that moment, the chamber doors opened unexpectedly. Emma walked in, followed by her mother and Ambassador Crawford. She was supposed to be in the guest quarters, but somehow she had found her way to the most important political meeting in the galaxy. I'm sorry, Commander Martinez said quickly. She insisted that her friends needed her help, and she wouldn't listen when I tried to explain that this was an adult meeting. Emma looked around the vast chamber with wide eyes, taking in the assembled representatives of 50 different species. Wow, she said softly. You're all so different and beautiful. Emma, HFY said gently, the counselors are discussing important matters. Perhaps you should return to your quarters. But Dr. Corvin, Emma said, Zix and Whisper of Storms and Korth are all worried. They heard the adults talking about whether humans are smart enough to be in the club, and they wanted me to tell you something important. The chamber was completely silent now. Every counselor was staring at the small human child who had walked fearlessly into the center of galactic politics. What did they want you to tell me? HFY asked. They said that they don't care if humans are the smartest, Emma said seriously. They said that working with me made them feel smarter than they ever felt before, and they want to keep doing that because it's fun and because they can solve problems together that none of them could solve by themselves. She looked around at the assembled counselors with the earnest expression of a child sharing something important. "Isn't that what friends do? Help each other be better?" Counselor Whisper of Stars made a soft harmonic sound that translated as surprised recognition. "The child speaks truth. My own young one has been more creative and insightful since these collaboration sessions began." "As has mine," admitted Counselor Vexti. "Young Zix has developed emotional reasoning capabilities that we thought impossible for crystalline entities." One by one, the other counselors began sharing similar observations. Their young representatives had not just enjoyed working with Emma. They had grown in ways that single-species education could never achieve. "The question," said Supreme Counselor Nethe slowly, "is not whether humans deserve membership in the Advanced Sciences Council. The question is whether we can afford to continue without them." Emma brightened. "Does that mean we can keep having play sessions with everyone? Because I have lots of ideas for new games we could try." The chamber filled with what could only be described as laughter, though it took many different forms across the various species. Crystalline chiming, Threnody harmonics, mechanoid processing beeps, and dozens of other expressions of amusement and joy. "Emma," Supreme Counselor Nethe said kindly, "I believe we can arrange for many more play sessions." 3 months later, the Federation established its first interspecies collaborative learning center aboard Meridian Prime. Young beings from across the galaxy came to learn not just their own species' approaches to problem solving, but how to work together with radically different forms of intelligence. Emma served as the center's first director of cognitive bridge building, a title she had invented herself because she thought teacher sounded too serious for what was essentially. Organized Playtime got Dr. HFY published a revolutionary paper titled Intelligence as Synthesis.